Hello, and welcome to the Weekly Scroll Podcast. My name is Ryan, and today we have a very special guest with us. That is Stuart Watkinson of Largshire Press. How you doing today, Stuart?
I'm pretty good, thanks, Ryan. How are you?
Good, not too bad. Tired. I think we both are, but we're getting there. A little colder than you. But today we have you. Well, let's get to that in a second. So we've been following each other for quite a while. Honestly, I think you might have been one of our first followers way back in the time. So got to say we really appreciate that, and we've been following your stuff for quite a while too. So it's nice to have you on.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was one of the first. I always was really searching for podcasts that did things that weren't 5e. So I sort of try and follow as many of those podcasts as I can. And your podcast popped up, and it was doing. I think some of your first reviews were games that I was playing at the time and stuff like that. So it all just worked really well.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, like I said, it's nice to. I never believe someone when they're like, "Oh, I'm a fan of your show." It's just I never will. So it's nice to have someone on that's been here for a while. So, yeah. So, for those that might not know who Stuart Watkinson is, who the heck are you, and what are some things that people might have from you or seen from you?
Yeah, no worries. I'm Stuart. I'm from Australia. I'm a high school teacher most of the time, and a writer. And I say game designer, but I really like other people's SRDs as opposed to creating my own mechanics. I like filling in the blanks with creativity. Something that you might know of mine is Wretched Wasteland, which was the first thing that I did that wasn't 5e. I have done a number of 5e things through the Dungeon Masters Guild, and then in 2020 moved into mostly doing things that are not 5e. So Wretched Wasteland was a Kickstarter last year or the year before. Last year? No, the year before, in the middle of the year. And another one might be like, yeah, there you go. You've got both of them. There you go.
Yeah, this one's got a little thing right there. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's so funny thing that original one, I only printed 20 of those at my local printer here I live in like a small country town. That book, that's cost so much money to print. They were like, I was like, how much for 20? And they gave me some ridiculous number. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, how much for like 500? And they were like, the same. It was exactly the same price per unit. Oh, you've got them too. Look at you go.
Dude, hey, I told you I've been following your stuff as long as you've been following our stuff. Wow. So I've got most things. So yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So that's Winterbrook. Winterbrook is an adventure, which you can get on Exalted. You might know me from that. I actually forget about those things. Isn't that funny? And then Zombies, you may know me from Zombies. That's I've forgotten the name of that system. It's called What's So Cool About? But you're a zombie and you're defending your ancient temple, and there's all sorts of random generated characters and stuff you can do in there and try and defend your temple, which is mainly not really about defending the temple. It's more about being a weird zombie.
But I think this has got to be the first thing I got from you. And like this, as soon as I opened up this, I was like, all right, this is cool. It's just the giant You're Dead page. I loved it. Yeah, it's the What's So Cool system from Jared Sinclair. It's just I have a lot of What's So Cool. I don't even, there's so many, because these super light systems like this, lasers and feelings, stuff like that, they're just so easy to make really cool things. But I gotta say, probably my favorite. Like, I absolutely love this one.
You.
So
that was my first. I'd been playing a lot of Morkborg, if you can't tell by the layout of that thing. So that was my first go at really just playing around with layout and whatnot. I think I wrote that into the layout. I don't think I had a document with.
There is nothing wrong with that, and anyone that says there is a goddamn liar.
Exactly. So they're the things you might know me from. I've also recently started doing a Substack about game mastering called the Minimalist GM, which is just my thoughts about GMing and what I've been doing lately. So yeah, maybe you know me from Committee Quest podcast, which was a 5e actual play podcast that finished in around 2021, maybe. which we didn't actually get to finish because everyone had babies. So it was just too hard to schedule our D&D
There you
game.
go. That's why I keep my genes in my jeans, but I got to keep podcasting, you know?
Yeah. So that's where you might know me from.
Gotcha. So one thing you said, you talked about putting stuff on the GM's Guild, DM's Guild, copyright DM's Guild. But moved away from that to start doing your own things. And a lot of your stuff, you know, I know you did the what's around about zombies is another SRD and whatnot. But a lot of what you write, I mean, I know that Wretched Wasteland is obviously Wretched and Alone from 𝗧𝗵𝗲. But Rot Beneath Winterbrook, it's a system-agnostic adventure module. I know there was Largshire Press, which is or Largshire, which was a system-agnostic setting. And then the project we're going to talk about today, which is Abbott Trilogy, which is like a system-agnostic like adventure and setting and things like that for that too. What, I know you just said that you kind of like writing in other people's stuff more than like making your own mechanics, but what really pulls you towards doing something that's more system agnostic for adventures? Is it so that there's more options in the OSR, or just in general something that's just away from 5e?
So firstly, it started as something being away from 5e. So the thing that I found really challenging and conflicting is writing in the Wizards of or in the Dungeons and Dragons lexicon, and having to use a very particular structure and having to write things a certain way. It just really felt unnatural. And then I can't remember what the adventure was. Might have been one of 𝗧𝗵𝗲's. 𝗧𝗵𝗲's had a lot of impact on the things that I've made, which we'll talk about a bit today. I can't remember where it was, but anyway, I ran this adventure that had super minimal stuff, and I was like, this is heaps better. I feel so much more comfortable at the table. You know, I've read enough of this adventure to know it, but I'm not every other encounter returning back to my adventure module to read through and make sure I've got it right. You know, like for a bit of background, I started DMing only in 2016, I think, because a local group up here were doing Dungeons and Dragons and needed DMs, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. So we were doing Adventurers League, which for someone learning were really good because they were really in depth and gave you all the answers. But once I sort of got the hang of things, I found them really constraining. So the idea of a system agnostic adventure just fits better with me and how I like to run things, and hopefully how other people like to run things.
Yeah, you know, I kind of came to it a little bit late too. What's funny, like when I was a kid, I played a lot of Magic the Gathering, and I was reading, I just feel like a douchebag when I say this, but I was reading like higher level fiction than my grade, like pretty early. So my dad would just go to the library and just pull home, like in like 5th, 6th grade, just all these thick ass TSR books. And then when I got old enough to kind of like get into that again, or start like, I read all this level of fantasy, let me go find these other level of fantasy, or this other type of fantasy. I was like, oh, I've read that and that and that, and then I got D&D with Forgotten Realms, and I'm like, wait a minute, I've read all of this. I've read Drizzt, I've read Dragonlance, I've read like every dragon Dungeons and Dragons setting novels without ever realizing it was a game. I guess I just never looked at the ads in the back or something.
That's really weird to look at, and that, like, if you don't know what that is, it's a hard thing to decipher if you're a 10-year-old or 12-year-old kid.
Oh yeah. So then, so when the 5e set dropped in 2014, I became a forever GM. So we've been going at it for just a little bit, and I felt the same way. You know, I actually got to a point where I started a meetup because there was nothing in my area, and it got to like 350 members. We were doing Adventures League like every weekend and everything, and then the pandemic hit. But I was already kind of feeling exactly like how you were feeling, where I was just like, I like gymming. I love playing a game, but like, why am I rewriting every adventure and homebrewing pretty much the entire system before I kind of like, you know, parse into a different area? So it's kind of a common occurrence with a lot of people, especially heading into the pandemic, being like, I have time to do something else.
Yeah, that's right. And when you start exploring other game systems, you're like, oh, okay, this feels better with me. These are games that are made by people that have been doing DMing and running probably Dungeons and Dragons for a long time, and have stripped those things away to a bit more, something a bit more that includes the necessities as opposed to all the stuff that 5e has.
Yeah. It's just like you said, it's just a restrictive language. I felt like, why is everyone going to Twitter to ask these two dudes like the ins and outs of every single individual rule, instead of just being like, do whatever you want, like, and that was kind of the impetus. So it's good to hear that I was not the only one and that you also felt the same way.
No, you're not alone.
So I know, you also said, we're kind of switch gears a little bit here, you started DMing in 2016 and now you're doing the Substack for DMing. What was kind of the impetus to want to not only be writing a bunch of stuff, but to do a Substack for GMing?
I think I just wanted to write down my ideas. I had a really interesting experience in 2021 and 2022 where I ran a 𝗬𝗵𝗲 style game, and it was like the best sort of game I've ever played. It was the players were so engaged. The world just came together really easily. I did hardly any prep work. Most of the note keeping was done by the players. And it just felt like a much more balanced type of gaming. In the past, I've ran a lot of games where I'm the knowledge. I hold all the knowledge of the table, and quite often it would get to the point where I would have to tell the players all the clues that they have. Like, these are all the things that you've done. And now, like it just found it was really hard and very difficult to get. So the idea of like building a world and then having characters play in it, and then them not caring about all this lore you've created. Whereas with this game that we played, I gave them very minimal lore, and we only talked about the stuff that was interesting for them. And they also had a big share in what came from that. Like, for example, they came across this, it was a random table, and they came across some werewolves and wolves, and their reaction was standoffish but not aggressive, basically. So through this discussion and some dice rolls, they discovered that they just wanted knowledge. What the wolves wanted was knowledge, and then they could pass through the forest. So they gave them a map, which had never seen a map before. And so then they had given cartography to the werewolves, and the werewolves then became like these cartographers because they knew the land so well, and then had never really thought about. So like, it was just super cool. Like, there's no way I could have prepped for that to happen. And I sort of just figured, what's the point of prepping for that to happen? Like, I've got a loose idea of where you're going and what's going to happen, but all the deep lore comes out in other ways. Yeah, so that's kind of where that came from. And also because I mentioned off air that I've recently had a child, and I'm probably not going to play a lot of D&D this year, or RPGs this year. And so, yeah, it's just a sort of a therapeutic writing about gaming for the next year or so. Yeah, that's where that came from.
So when you kind of did that pivot from 5e into like different systems and whatnot, was there a system you specifically like latched onto that you converted into playing, or was it just like your variation of 5e, or what?
Oh, no. I came across Into the Odd when this was before it was I just listened to the previous last week's episode, and that was the discussion about Into the Odd was excellent. So Into the Odd became my go-to. I run a school D&D club, and so an after-school club, and I said to the kids, look, I've taught, like, we had like 20 kids, most of them know the rules enough to play. I said, when I GM, I'm going to run Into the Odd. You guys run 5e, and so I just started running Into the Odd, and the kids loved it, and I loved it, and I really got into it. And from there, I found Can, which I also really got into. And then I went back. My brother picked. Well, I sent a link to a sale for Dungeon Crawl Classics to my brother. I've got a brother who's he's 12 years older than me, so I think he got the red box when he was 12 or whatever, and so he's been a big D&D guy his whole life. And I'm like, hey man, I think you're going to like this. And he does, and he's basically bought up anything that was for sale on land in Australia. He's bought, and so that became the other one. So mainly Into the Odd, Can, and DCC.
Those are good ones to get into that I wish I would have found earlier.
Yeah, same. Yeah, like Into the Odd's great. Like I think it's just such a simple, fun system. And you can, and that's probably also where the system agnostic stuff came from, because to do the stuff in my adventures, you don't need a lot of mechanics to move through it. You just, if it's dangerous or something tricky is going to happen, you just roll the dice and see what happens. Yeah,
that is what's really nice about like the kind of like, not going to get into the OSR or whatever it currently is in the movement now, but all of the kind of like post 2008 OSR stuff, where outside of like pure OSE style retro clones, like everything just fits. Like Karen is a hack of Into the Odd, so it works really well, but like you literally can do a quick conversion in like 4 lines. It's like if your HD is 4s instead of 8s, or if you're, this one doesn't have it to hit roll or whatever, you can play pretty much anything across Into the Odd, across Cairn, across Knave, across pretty much all of the pretty light systems. So it's really nice. System agnostic now is really nice because, exactly like you said, like if I know the core dice rolls, just go off, just do whatever, rulings over rules, etc. So cool.
Yeah, it just works, man. I just like it. It works.
So the Abbott Trilogy, the system agnostic zine triple feature you're writing right now for ZineQuest. What was the why? What are we doing? Like, what's going on? Just talk to me about the Abbott Trilogy. Why? What are we, outside of the gorgeous covers, like what do we got going on with this?
So these 3 adventures, 2 of which were written quite a while ago. So I wrote one which was originally called Demon's Bane in the Bitter Peak for Adventure Jam by Chris Passett. And that was written as a 5e adventure, and I just put it on a website, and it was free on a website, and I forgot about it. And then the following year, there was another Adventure Jam by Chris, and I did another adventure called, I can't remember what it was called now. Abbott's More had a much more convoluted name. It was like the Troll Priest in the Stinky Swamp City or something. It was a very convoluted name. I had taken their adventure name generator.
The adventure generator?
Yeah. That's where both of the names came from, and I sort of tweaked them and whatnot. So those 2 adventures sat there for 2 years. And then last year I was chatting with Kirill, the artist, about, I'm like, hey, I got these 2 adventures. I think I might do a Kickstarter to turn them into something else. And Kirill was like, don't do a double feature, do a trilogy. I was like, oh, okay. So then I started thinking about a 3rd one, which is Still Hollow. And so these 3 adventures are going from 3 separate adventures into, 2 separate adventures into 3 linked ones that can sort of run as a campaign. And so essentially, it's all system agnostic. They cover Abbott's More is a swamp setting, Bitter Peak is like a frozen tundra, and then Still Hollow is desert. And they all have science fiction and fantasy elements, and more fantasy with a few science fiction elements as opposed to science fiction with fantasy. I know that doesn't sound like a big difference, but
it is.
Yeah, cool.
Big
all right,
difference.
Good. Yeah, I realized while I was writing this that I don't actually like science fiction with fantasy elements, but I really like fantasy with science fiction elements. I don't know why that is for me, but that's just where I'm at. So the 3 adventures, essentially, and it all centers around a the Abbot, who is a troll priest that lives in 𝗵𝗵𝗲. Now, this going forward, this is going to be spoiler heavy. I'm just going to talk about these adventures pretty well, as in depth as we want to go. So if you are a player and you're like, I don't want to know what happens in these adventures, you can skip forward to when I talk about the Kickstarter. So
my memory is terrible, so I won't remember anyway. So I'll be excited later.
Good. Yeah. So 𝗵𝗲𝗲 starts like in media res, like the idea being that. So I've ran RPGs a lot of times for brand new people, and whenever I start them in a town, it just takes forever to get out of the town because they're excited about going to see the candlestick maker or the magic shop or the tavern. And so I like starting a new campaign sort of in the exploration location. So this adventure starts in the swamp, and there are all these ruins throughout the swamp. It's quite a large space. It's a hex crawl where dice are used to roll. You roll the dice onto the map, and it randomly generates where these locations are. And then depending on the number on the dice, that's how many explorers are in that space. And explorers are just your generic explorer who are there doing whatever, and they have an impact on that location. And it's not a very nice place. You know, there's crocodiles and leeches and mosquitoes, and there's something going. As you meet more explorers, you see that they're getting impacted by whatever's happening here. And there's a few main NPCs that are the Abbot's followers who you encounter and fight, maybe befriend, perhaps, but they're not very nice. So they're probably not going to befriend them. I don't know. Who knows what they're going to do? And so that adventure uses, what was it called? I wrote about it the other day. So for that adventure jam, it was about including this list of stuff that was written into at the start of one of the original D&D adventures. So here we go. Sorry, I'm reading from something now. Follow the rules outlined for dungeons in a classic D&D module B1, Search for the Unknown by Mike Carr. And so there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10 things in there that and these include one-way secret doors, illusions and magic mouths, a wind corridor, a room of doors, a water pit trap, all these sorts of things. And so it was kind of creating this was like, I found these using Dyson Logos's collection of maps, and they were originally like lich crypt mounds, but they're now spread out in this swamp, and each one sort of aligns with that. I don't think I get all of them, but I think I get most of them. I'm sort of going through them at the moment. And so there's some pretty harsh stuff in there, like the magic mouth, which is a thing that in you disappear from. I've got 3 of them instead of 1, but those 2 of them lead to the other 2 adventures. So you might jump into a desert, or you might jump into a frozen cave or something like that. So yeah, 𝗵𝗵𝗲𝗲 is a hex crawl through a swamp, and culminating in the monastery where you find a group of rat folk who worship and help the abbot. And then you meet the abbot, and the abbot is a powerful and strange and sort of menacing troll that has found this ancient god and is working on something that they're not telling you about. And they want you and your party to go out into the world and find things, because none of his followers are brave enough to leave the swamp. And the thing that's happening throughout this is you're finding all this weird science fiction stuff. Like there's a laser gun in there. There's teleportation devices. There's all of this high-tech stuff in these ancient ruins that the characters are finding. And then there's the abbot, who's got this other strange god that they worship. So that's 𝗵𝗵𝗲𝗲. Now, 𝗵𝗵𝗲𝗲 could actually be played on its own as just a one-shot. You go in, you fight the abbot, and that's the end of the show. However, if you choose to take on the quest that he has, he leads you on then to 𝗵𝗵𝗲𝗃. And 𝗵𝗵𝗃 is originally had started with a town, and it had like this whole storyline about a missing dwarf, and it was written for 5e. So like it had like all this 5e stuff that you sort of are standard in 5e adventures to have X amount of hooks and a certain reason and a storyline that's happening. And just today, actually, I have gone through that and pulled all that out and have changed that completely. Oh, sorry. Did you say you have like the artwork there? Is that a thing that you have available, or does that play through? Yeah, cool.
I do. Yeah. So there was one, and then our one of our co-hosts, Hunter, did not make it, so this new one isn't. But I'll pull that up, and we'll throw that up on stream here real quick. Yeah,
cool. So while Abbott's more is like, it's dangerous, but it's not really a survival thing. You know, like each hex is only about 4 hours to move through. It's just more dangerous and exploring weird things. 𝗵𝗶 changes into a bit more of a surviving in the cold wasteland, trying to get to the 𝗵𝗶, which is a mountain.
Make that a little smaller. Boom.
And
there we go. I'm just gonna hide me, and you can talk about Abbott's more.
Cool.
Boom. The art on these, I do have to say, is absolutely astounding.
Yeah. Yeah. So 𝗵𝗶 was actually a piece that was done along like 2 years ago when I wrote that adventure by 𝗧𝗵𝗶 𝗧𝗿, who is an artist in Europe, in Belgium, who also did the artwork for the interior artwork for Wretched Wasteland. And I was like, look, I want simple colors. This is what is included. And there's those three adventurers in the tundra. And it was awesome. And I loved it. And I had this artwork just sitting there doing nothing because I didn't actually do anything with that adventure. So when we decided to put them all together, 𝗧𝗵𝗶 was like, well, what if the 3 adventurers are on all 3 covers? And then I was like, yes. And what if those adventurers are a rival party throughout these adventures? So in Abbott's More, there's like evidence of other adventuring parties, not just like the explorers, but there's evidence of other adventurers that had been there. And you don't really, there's not enough to really go on. You can just tell that, hey, someone's been through this really specifically. And then a couple of the other NPCs drop hints about the other worthy group that came through, and then the abbot says something as well. So you get this idea that there's another adventuring party. In 𝗵𝗶, there's a chance to do a random encounter with them, but you don't necessarily meet them. And then in Still Hollow, they're at the town when you get to the town. So I decided to remove the town from 𝗵𝗶 just because it sort of ended up having like Still Hollow and 𝗵𝗶 were both town exploration end boss thing. And so instead of that, there's just like this, I don't know if you've ever been hiking, but sometimes when you go hiking and your way out, there's like these huts that are set up for hikers to stay in, and you can go and stay in them overnight. And sometimes they're free. There's a lot of them in New Zealand. And I think in Canada we did it as well. But you stay in them and they're just sort of simple huts. And so now at the start of 𝗵𝗶, you're like, it starts, you're in this hut, and there's these other people that are also heading out into the waste to do exploring or passing through or whatever. And then you go out into the frozen tundra, and it's pretty awful. There's yetis and frost giants and ice dragons and not very nice stuff, and eventually coming to the 𝗵𝗶 where the Demon's Bane is. And the Demon's Bane is all these rumors talking about Demon's Bane being a sword that is used to kill demons and defend the realm. But when you get to the top of the 𝗵𝗶, it's actually a person who's got a job, and they're like, hey, you're here to replace me. Cool. So who's staying? And so that's kind of the ultimatum that's given to the party. There's a few things that are connected to the quest as well. And then comes Still Hollow. Now, Still Hollow is the desert adventure, which rumors say there is a god that is trapped underneath the sand out in the deep desert, and the god is the reason why the desert is strange and ever changing. So the party start in a town called 𝗵𝗲, which is, as the name suggests, on the edge of the map. And it has, this is where you finally meet the rival adventuring party who have exactly the same goal as you. And there's the idea with this adventure is that whilst the other two have been a lot of doing and moving through things and exploring and whatnot, this gives a bit of time in town to hang out in a tavern, to meet other NPCs, more NPCs, to have a bit of respite before heading out into the desert to try and find the god. And I watched a lot of Dune when I was growing up, the movie Dune, and so there's a lot of that influence in this adventure. There's sandworms, and there's giant dragonfly things that you can fly on, and other sand deserty related things. However, coming to the end where you come to this half covered ruin, and opening the door, you enter essentially an elevator, like a modern day elevator, and there is a very long period as you're descending into the earth. And it's sort of because it's just a room, and I didn't really want that to be like, hey, you're sitting in a room and now you're at the end. That's got a heap of like social interaction questions and reflection questions for GMs and players to ask each other about where they're at and what they've been doing, because throughout these three adventures they've seen some pretty unusual stuff. Some of them will be carrying science fiction weapons, some of them will have magic items, or what they think are magic items but are actually pieces of technology. So it's just a bit of downtime after some desert exploring before they go into to meet the god who is trapped at the end. And the god is essentially a computer, an AI from an ancient science fiction civilization. And that's where I'm actually still writing this bit, so I'm not too sure whether that's going to be a full-on social encounter, or if that's going to have a combat element, or if there's going to be like a bit of a puzzle there. I don't really know, but it's an AI, and a lot of this came out of my thoughts on AI at the moment, and how it's sort of becoming everyone's marketing everything as being AI. And I'm like, well, 2 years ago, you wouldn't have said it was AI. You would have said you had new technology. But now AI is this buzzword.
It's just buzzwords because it's not AI. It's just a slightly better, like yes, no, like algorithm, which cracks me up.
Yeah. And there's a lot of discussion online about AI and writing and art, and how, just how, like, but I'll be honest, and sorry for anyone that loves AI, but how awful it is that instead of using instead of using technology to assist us in our mundane things, people are using it to take away our soul, like the thing that makes us human. Like, people don't do art because they just want to make money. They do art because they want to express themselves. That's why people write words. Like, that's, anyway.
No, I think I'll hop in real quick and say I'm not sorry if you love AI. You can go fuck yourself.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
good. Yeah, because it's really, I like in my work, like as a teacher, the idea of AI comes up all the time, and I'm just like, why are we? Yeah. Anyway, it's I think until, yeah, I'm not going to get into that. So that's where I'm at, and that's where I'm at mentally with what are we going to do with this AI machine that they find at the underneath the desert. And that's essentially the story parts that come up in those 3 adventures. However, there's a lot there that's random. There's a lot of encounters that are random. There's a lot of interactions that will be random, depending on what the party are carrying, what items they have, what people they've interacted with. And that's one thing that I really loved from the old Fallout games, is that if you rolled into a town wearing a certain thing, or if you had a certain item, or if you had a certain person with you, that would impact the reactions that happen when you get there. So that's stuff that at the moment, and today and this week especially, is the fun thing I get to do. Is I'm taking these 3 adventures that were essentially on their own and weaving them all together and finding all the connective tissue that puts them together. And like, it's actually, today was pretty cool. I had like 3 Word documents open, and as I was going through one and writing something, I was then adding a bit to the 3rd one. And so it's been a fun writing day today. Yeah, so that's the adventure.
Sounds awesome. I love this. I know there's a word for it. I mean, if it's science fantasy or whatever, but my personal vernacular, I always call it future past. Where cool. Like, we're so far in the future, but we keep in like running into these objects of the past, but we're in this like less technologically advanced future and keep running into more technologically advanced pieces of the past. And then people can read that, right? You can read 𝗔𝗵𝗲 and be like, oh, clearly that is this like advanced piece of like science fantasy, but somehow our brains right now can't go, man, maybe people were good at math and could build the pyramids, because we're
yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
But I love those elements. There's some really great, more spoilers, just some really great fantasy books that I really enjoy, like that, like the Broken Empire series from Mark Lawrence does it. Like I said, 𝗔𝗵𝗲 does a lot of that. You're like, hundreds of pages in, and you're like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe that's us, like way in the future, and our technology is these giant things they keep running into. So I really, really enjoy that style of fiction. So it sounds great. Like this sounds really neat. I'm excited for the computer at the end and what you decide to do. Maybe it's just yes/no generators and combat or social encounter puzzles, all determined by the way that you interact with the interface. But
yeah, or it's been really tracking you the whole time, like
right?
The end of an RPG where you get the story spat out based on what all your choices were. I don't know.
When Neo meets the architect, you get to be that. I have seen all the screens,
Yeah,
that sounds super neat. Super excited for that. So that was a question. That's like one of the 2 questions I wrote down as we were going. Also wrote 𝗔𝗵𝗲, which got to talk about him enough. How much is written? And you just kind of answered that. It sounds like, one was written a while ago. The bulk of one is done, and you're just kind of getting towards the ending of the other, and then just kind of making through lines, or?
So 2 of them are completely written, and I am just doing an editing phase, and that's like adding bits and pieces that make them fit. And then the last one is almost finished, actually. I've done everything except for the AI machine, and basically just because I'm at a bit of a roadblock there. And my thinking was that if I go back to the other 2 adventures and see all the little bits that I've already added, that might spark something there. And I think I do know what I'm going to do already, but I just haven't put it down yet. So the writing's basically done, except for the last major encounter and some connective stuff, which all the connective stuff I'll actually finish this week. I've got a couple of days up my sleeve, which is good. And then, it's just artwork and layout, which is essentially what the Kickstarter is for. So the Kickstarter is about paying 𝗵𝗲 to do art, and then me putting the layout together.
That's great. I mean, that's where, so as someone who's backed quite a few Kickstarters, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 500, it's really great when people have at least most of the writing done. Like, the number of people I've seen get burnt out and basically just be like, I can't do this anymore because, they wrote, a premise, or maybe it's a beginning part, and then life happens and it puts them behind, and like all this other stuff. Like, if everything that you can do is done, which is most of the writing, and you can just be like, I'm just waiting for a layout and art, that's a Kickstarter that I'm much more likely to back. So it's really great that that's where you're at, because you know, once it's you give it to professionals who do the layout and the art, and that's what they do, then they'll get it done and give it to you, and then, you know, you get the project. So
exactly right. And I've been in the same spot, and I personally probably wouldn't, unless there was something huge, I probably wouldn't go to Kickstarter if I hadn't had most of the writing done. I've said before that Kickstarter, when you kickstart something, you're sort of paying for a promise, and you know, the promise is that there'll be 3 adventures with art, and I will have my side that I need to do is the writing, and that'll be done before the Kickstarter launches. But I've worked with Qiral before, and they're just excellent. So we've given ourselves enough time to sort of work through that. So yeah, that'll be cool.
Yeah. So good segue into the Kickstarter. So what's the deal with the Kickstarter? So first of all, what are the dates of the Kickstarter? When is this actually going to be going through? And it's for ZineQuest.
It is for ZineQuest. So it's going to go 1st of February, and for 21 days. So 3 weeks flat, which is, I think, a Thursday to Thursday pretty much. And well, Thursday. Yeah, I think it's Thursday to Thursday. So 3 weeks. We're looking for $2,500, which is Australian dollars, to cover artwork, layout, and printing. Shipping will be on top of that, and shipping at the moment is either going to go through, come out of Australia, because what I've noticed is that Australian shipping's better than, like, cheaper. Sorry, not better, cheaper. However, if this is really successful, I've spoken to a few other parties to be like, hey, if you're in America, would you be able to do the distribution in America, and would you be able to do the distribution in Europe? Based on my last Kickstarters, those 2 spaces were the largest. So we'll see where that lands. And so that's when that's starting. We've got a few tiers. We're not going crazy with the reward tiers there. So you'll be able to buy just one. Now, all these prices I'll give you both, actually, because I've done everything in Australian. But so if you wanted to get just one PDF of one of these, it's $8 Australian, which is about $5.30 US. And then that's just one adventure. We'll probably use back a kit or something, and you'll be able to pick which one you want to do then. And then if you wanted to get all 3 adventures in digitally, that's $15, which is about $10 US.
That's a steal right there.
Yeah. Well, my thinking is that if you support at the Kickstarter, your ground level, you're making this thing happen. And then and because of the people who back this, it becomes something that other people can buy. So these prices don't stay the same when they leave Kickstarter. They got, not a lot, but they go up a little bit. And then we have, oh no, sorry, I've got that wrong. Lone Adventurer. That's that is one print for 15 AU. All 3 PDFs is $21 Australian, which is $14 US for all 3 adventures. So still pretty good.
Still pretty good, yeah.
And then we're going to have an early bird price called the Scoundrel, which is $36. This is $36 for the 3 printed zines and PDFs, which works out to about $24 US. So it's very, very cheap for that early bird. Okay. But there's only 70 of those. And then the full price is $42 for all 3, which is just under $30 US for all 3 printed and digital, but not including shipping. And that's all. Oh, and then we have also set up a gaming store retail tier where you can get 4 copies of each for about 120. So yeah, keeping it simple. We do have a couple of stretch goals. We're not going too crazy. I have seen a number of Kickstarters get inundated with, they get, like some people have, they're experienced, they've got their stuff sorted, they're all ready to go. Whereas others have been like, oh yeah, we've got this stretch goal, and now we're floundering. And I really want to sort of have this out, printed, delivered before the end of the year. So the first stretch goal is for an overland travel pamphlet. So this is using some of my own sort of simple rules and random encounters traveling between these locations. And it's just like an A5 folding pamphlet that has all the transportation stuff there. And then the next one is a world map that Kirill's going to make that includes those 3 locations. It also includes Largshire and Winterbrook from my other adventures on that map. And then some unnamed places that you as you're playing can name them with your table. And then from there, it's just a revenue split. So once we've paid for everything, the revenue split will go between myself and Kirill. And most of my revenue from this will be going into Largshire Press, which is creating more stuff over the next year, with the idea being that over this year, all my writing will be going to a new project, and the layout and distribution stuff will finish off this Kickstarter.
That's such a great layout for a Kickstarter right there, because I know you've Kickstarted projects before, because I do have this guy right here, the Wretched Wasteland with the bookmark, but to have something that is, incredibly reasonably priced, like that's crazy. And I have read your writing before. It is fantastic. So I highly, highly recommend grabbing pretty much anything that Largshire Press puts out from now on. Not pretty much, all of it. It's great. But that's extremely reasonably priced. If it does ship out of Australia, it will be slightly pricey. I have bought stuff from Australia before, but even then it's going to be a lot less than you would think for a lot of stuff. So not only is it reasonably priced, like the stretch goals are incredibly, like you're not having to do another zine, which means you don't have to talk to printers as much again. Like doing a pamphlet's not too bad. The world map sounds fantastic. So reasonable stretch goals, a reasonable funding goal, pretty straightforward, possible distribution. That it's like you said, so many people can get bogged down in like having 10 stretch goals. Now they have to get 10 more writers. They basically have to write as much as they wrote the first time, or they add dice, or they add this or add that. Like it's really good to hear that you have an incredibly reasonably like fundable, attainable, deliverable goal that's almost completely written with fantastic art already. So these are the Kickstarters where I'm like, yes, I'm gonna actually get this, and it's not gonna be 3 years, and it's gonna be good,
Yeah, well, that's and I totally understand how it happens. Even Wretched Wasteland was probably 2 or 3 months later than what I had anticipated, but that's just how the cookie crumbles. And on the shipping, like that's going to be, we'll see how that goes. It's sort of at the moment, it's like at current prices. And that's the other thing. Like if something horrible happens with Australian shipping and the prices get out of control, I'm obviously not going to continue with that. But at the moment, it's about $13 to $18 US, depending on weights of things. So that's just the world we live in, unfortunately, at the moment, is that shipping costs money, and far more than it ever did before. Which it's really disappointing that we're still in this space where shipping around the world is so expensive.
Yeah, it's getting worse and worse, just getting from, I was talking with who was I talking with? Alex T from Black Oath, just about how crazy, and because they do a lot of Kickstarter stuff, but end up putting a lot of stuff on print on demand because it's cheaper to just get print on demand using the Europe store or the American store than sometimes to ship a whole pallet across, and the shipping thing is just a concern for a lot of Europe when England, kind of did their whole Brexit thing and whatnot. Like just things got crazy. One boat crashes and things are ruined forever,
I know, isn't it wild? Yeah, it just shows how fragile everything is. But
But
look,
that's still reasonable. I mean, $13 plus the total cost of the zines in general is still a great price, you know, comparatively to, you know, because I would pay easily that much for 3 like tied together adventure zines. You can be playing that for months and months and months, you know. So that's really realistically, I mean, even with $13 shipping, or if it's more than that, incredibly reasonably priced. So you know,
well, what I found was that the cost of printing in Australia is cheaper than, because with Wretched Wasteland, I had initially thought that I would get it all printed in England and then sent, because that was distributed through 𝗧𝗵𝗲, and then sent there. But it was like, oh, and some of it I did do, like I sort of did a split on that, and I printed some here. But the printing that I did here was cheaper than the printing in England. So like it's and it's still pretty much at the same price. So when I did all the costing for this, I was like, oh no, this is still pretty good. And you know, we'll see how we go.
Yeah.
I'm pretty happy with this collection of adventures. I'm really happy with 𝗧𝗏𝗆's artwork. Like those 3 pieces are just they're like because they're different colors. They're clearly different, but they just link together so well, and that being, and just those images being the catalyst for having this idea of a rival adventuring party was really cool. It's really cool.
Yeah, they're gorgeous pieces. I mean, they're all over your Twitter page as well. They're all over 𝗧𝗏𝗆's page as well. They're fantastic. And yeah, the 3 different color things in one of the promo images, I haven't put it up, but one of the ones you sent me, there's like the fetid, the frozen, and the fickle. That's great taglines for like the fetid swamp, the frozen tundra, and like the fickle desert. That's fantastic. I mean, there's really great tie-ins, and realistically, I mean, as far as like adventure locations, those are such fantastic vibey places to be when you have the swamp, the frozen peak, and then the desert. There's really great takes across all of that. So I mean, again, the project sounds great. Now that I got spoiled for the story, it sounds even better. So really stoked for this one. Excited to get it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited. And you know, the story that I've talked about is only what, you know, is only part of the elements that are in there. There's so much more that could happen, and your story might not play out that way because that's how,
it's not 5e.
That's how gaming goes. That's exactly right. Yeah, cool.
So yeah, I mean, for Largshire Press going forward from here, I know you said that a lot of what's going to come from the Abbott Trilogy, anything extra is going to be funding towards putting out other stuff. Do you have things on the horizon past Abbott Trilogy, or are you kind of focusing, you know, mostly on that right now?
Yeah. I'm always tinkering at something. Last year, I spent a lot of the year coming up with my own game that uses Mark of the Odd, or Into the Odd game, which is a science fiction or a science fantasy post-apocalyptic game. We played a lot of that, and it really turned more into a skirmish game as we played, with like a bit of role playing. So I don't know where that's going to go. I don't know if that's going to get stripped down and become a bit of a little mini skirmish game. We played a lot of the Lord of the Rings battle companies last year, and that clearly had an impact on my writing, because I was like, oh yeah, look, I'm just making Lord of the Rings rules here for my game. And then so that's a thing. I think that's probably going to get stripped down and become like an Into the Odd skirmish game, and then the other bits in there that are taken from that are going to go into a solo or co-op game using a different system in the same world, I think. But we'll just see where that goes. I've let that sit for a bit. For the last 3 months, I've been focusing on this project, and yeah, so that's probably what's going to come. And I'm also doing fiction writing, so there'll be some fiction coming out this year from Largshire Press as well.
Nice. And then more blog posts about GMing games and
blog posts will be coming weekly or fortnightly, depending on my week and my fortnight. And then I think there'll be a game design like regular game design posts as well. I usually, whenever I do a big thing with a game or a system that I've been working on, I'll usually do a blog post as well, which you can get on the website. Yeah. So Largshire Press is a new, Largshire, just for those, anyone that's been following me may have noticed that I've changed from Stuart Watkinson on everything to Largshire Press. And that was like that's a really weird, relieving thing. I was like, oh yeah, no, look, I think I want to put things under something else that isn't my name. And then I did all of that and I was like, oh, it's not me anymore. It's this thing. And it was really quite a good feeling to take myself out of the limelight. So whilst the website is still stuartwatkinson.com, that will change to largshire.press soon, but everything will be linked so that it all goes to the same spot.
Gotcha. Well, and speaking of stuartwatkinson.com, Largshire Press, all of that, your Substack, everything, where can people find all of what you currently have now and where they'll be able to find it in the future?
Yeah, so the best spot is the website because that links to everything. But if you search for Largshire Press on itch, you'll find me there. If you search for me on Threads or Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, you'll find Largshire Press stuff. If you search my name on the Dungeon Masters Guild, you'll be able to find all the other DM5e stuff that I've written as well. Yeah, so they're the main places. Instagram, Threads, and Twitter are my main spots, and then also Substack, which you'll find at those places.
Gotcha. All right. Listen, Stuart, again, really appreciate you being here. Appreciate you being a fan for as long as you have, and again, we're a fan of yours as well. So it's been really great to talk to you. Finally have you here on the show, and can't wait for the Abbott trilogy to come out. So thank you so much for being here.
No, thanks for having me. It's been awesome. Cheers.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is us for today. Make sure you on February 1st, everyone we talked to throughout the month and throughout all of ZineQuest 2, we're going to make sure we keep dropping links, keep dropping all of that throughout the time. So this won't be the last time you hear about the Abbott trilogy. But definitely want to go to the Kickstarter right now. We'll make sure that's in the links below and save that page so that you can back that on February 1st when it drops. So you will be hearing from Largshire Press again here on the show, I am sure. Again, Stuart, thank you so much for being here, and everybody out there, have a wonderful day. Bye.
See you later.